be here. I love you all.
Hello and welcome to the Scannain Podcast, your weekly look at the world of film news, Irish International. I'm Darren Mooney, and joining me are...
Alex.
Grace.
Jay.
And we're going to talk about what we normally do, which includes the top 10, the new releases, and the week in film news. But we're going to start with our usual stuff, which is, what have we watched this week? So what have you watched this week, Alex?
Sure. On Sunday, I went to see Batman Returns in the Lighthouse and was suitably blown away because it's a great Christmas movie.
It's a fantastic Christmas movie.
The other thing it is a very darkly sexual movie, which I did not remember from my childhood.
Odd how that goes over your head.
Yeah, it's shockingly so. Like, it had been a while since I'd seen it, and I loved it as a kid. It was like a staple of holidays and everything. And then when you're watching it again, the sort of back and forth between Catwoman and the Penguin and Batman.
Particularly the Penguin.
Particularly the Penguin.
His French flipper trick.
Yeah, he like walks upstairs once, and he looks horrifying anyway, and he walks into the room and literally says, just the pussy I've been looking for. And I remember thinking, that's not even, like, normally they'd sort of dress that up a little bit and maybe, nope, he just says it. It's shocking.
There's also, again, and I love the terrible puns, but when you compare terrible puns with, like, horribly age-inappropriate sense of humour, like, you're the coolest role model that a young person could have.
Yeah.
Well, you're the hottest young person that a role model could have.
Good Jesus. And it's followed by him, like, biting a man's nose off, and you see the blood squirting everywhere. And I remember thinking, like, no, I'd always heard that when it came out, parents and children didn't love this, and you can kind of see maybe why it took a hard right turn into, like, cartoony-ish and Joel Schumacher. But I kind of got that more watching this. Not to say that I didn't like it a lot, and it's a very interesting film, and it's fascinating, particularly when you compare it with Batman and how, like, the first one probably represents more of a compromise between, like, what the studio wants and what Tim Burton wants. But the second one is, like, a lot more Tim Burton.
It's like the first one's so successful. It's like, yeah, now you're going to get a load of me.
Away you go. Do whatever you want.
Wait till I get a load of me.
Yeah.
No, not that.
And so, yeah, it was very, very interesting because, and Christopher Walken was someone, again, who I kind of just hadn't taken in fully as a child. He's really, like, playing to the cheap seats. He's really going out with his performance.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's very interesting. And
what you going to do if she talks, Dad? I'll just throw out a high window.
It was so... it's so funny, and he's so odd or something. And it sort of makes sense that he's one of the main villains in a universe where you kind of know all the villains anyway and expect them to be over the top. And then they've just kind of created this new Christopher Walken villain. And his hilarious lookalike son, who's very, like, Trump-like as well.
Chip.
Chip. It was very good. The other film I watched was Paris is Burning, which is a documentary from the early 90s. Really, really fantastic, really interesting documentary.
Really relevant.
Yes, really relevant. It's just kind of interesting as well because, I saw the other day that RuPaul's Drag Race is going to be on the BBC next year and, sort of completely different environment. And then you look back and the thing that struck me most about Paris is Burning, which is sort of set in the early 90s following drag balls up in Harlem in New York, is like the danger involved and its presentation of how dangerous and how their lives were actually so sort of full and fraught of actual, like, danger and to the point where some of the characters they're following, actually one of them in particular, ends up murdered. And then when you read after the documentary what happened to them all, nearly all of them
it's not
died.
Great. And it's kind of the AIDS epidemic at the time as well.
Yeah,
it's a huge part of it. The FX show Pose gets into it. It kind of set in the same kind of world.
Okay,
documentary.
It's
remarkable.
inspired by it. If I'm
yeah,
right.
it is.
Isn't
It's kind of taken a run from it, like in terms of it's very influential in that regard.
Yeah.
And Pose is terrific and odd and kind of infuriating here and there, but it's really good.
Popping up in a lot of best of.
I can see why. There's certainly a couple of episodes that are outstanding, and there's some serious clunky plotting on it. But aside from that, it's really, really good, and a lot of trans actors and stuff in it, like a huge amount of people given proper work and roles and stuff like that, which is really good. But Paris Burning is very good, very sad at the end because it does kind of, you realise that for all the kind of the loudness and the flamboyance and fun, I guess, even in the heightened circumstances of the time, there's a tragedy underneath the whole thing. It's remarkable. I really love the documentary.
Yeah. No, and I think particularly as well, I don't like the phrase, every frame a painting and all that stuff that involves. That said, this particular documentary is remarkable for something that seems to be, it's absolutely beautiful. You could take any frame of it and it's so well composed. And for what a documentary that still retains that sort of fly on the wall, I'm just here shooting it, it's an incredible achievement. And it's on Netflix.
And about 80 minutes long as well.
Yep. So would highly recommend that.
One Varda long. Yeah.
The third film then I saw last week, I was over in America, so I saw The Favourite, the new Yorgos Lanthimos film.
Yeah,
And,
which also screened over here last week as well, actually.
Okay.
So I think I have seen it. Jay has seen it. I'm not sure. Grace, I don't think has seen it.
Grace is not in a hurry to see it. It's all
Okay.
good.
Yeah, I really loved his previous work, so I went into this one with a lot of anticipation, and I didn't love this one.
Because
Jason's
I
up
really
like
did.
And Darren unsurprisingly finds himself on his own on this one. This
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
I know it wouldn't have called this one. All right, go for it.
And Niall as well, in fairness, really liked it as well.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I wasn't a fan.
I didn't hate it. It's just, I think what really, as I say, I went in really sort of having loved particularly The Lobster, but then also Killing of a Sacred Deer, and like fully being on board for his particular balance of like tragedy and comedy and just surrealism, and finding that it was a lot more straightforward and a lot more like he'd sort of, I don't know if we can sort of say he's sacrificing some of his weirdness on the sort of altar of trying to get awards and make him more sort of worthy, but it did feel like that sometimes. There's definitely humor, there's definitely sort of surrealness, but it's been toned down, and I think
feels like
it's
surface level.
yeah, and toning it down, he's lost that element that I kind of think is some of one of the things that I think, you know, he's earned a lot of praise for previously. That's not to say the performance aren't so good. Olivia Colman in particular is fantastic. Emma Stone, really, really good. It's just, for me, it just didn't have that magic, I think, that some of his previous films had.
It kind of irritated me, and I was very much looking forward. This is one of the films I was looking forward to most towards the end of the year. Coleman's great. The cinematography is really, really beautiful.
In particular, the use of the fisheye lens
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well. For the
very,
sword
very
as well,
impressive.
particularly inside the house and stuff like that.
And there are some good moments there, but I think it thinks it's a lot funnier than it is.
Yeah.
And it's not heightened enough in the world that it's trying to capture to be farcical and weird in the way that it thinks it's being, in the way that, say, the Killing of the Sacred Deer, and whilst it's taking place in the world as we know it, doesn't seem, it's almost alien in its kind of
What's archness?
yeah, and dialogue delivery and heightened reality and all the kind of things that allows you to kind of play with kind of normal life in that way, in that kind of deadened way.
Yeah.
And this doesn't have that. So everything that happened in the scene to be there to provoke for no real reason beyond.
I
To be a
quite
little
like that. I
weirder.
actually found it's very odd in terms of in the context of a period drama. It's a lot less stagey, a lot less classy, a lot less sort of in terms of production value.
I found it quite stagey in that regard,
Oh,
because
okay.
it's trying to jump out of something in that way. Like, oh, look, we're not really a costume jammer. Look, we've got things
Yeah,
thrown at naked people.
That's
It's
what
like,
I found.
yeah,
Like, oh, here, I'm going to drop a swear word in
Yeah.
the middle of
Oh,
like a lot of Victorian
let's say the
speech.
C word 5 or 6
Yeah,
times and see how shocking it is.
that
Like, it's
kind
not
of thing,
really a
yeah.
shock anymore, like literally in 20 years,
And it
30
was
years.
alienating in a way that his previous films were not
Yeah.
positively alienating, if you know what I mean.
I was kind of mixed on it, and I've started to dislike it more the further I've got from it, which is
No, me too.
disappointing.
I went with someone who really loved it, and I found myself kind of criticizing it, and she was kind of more like positive on it. But as the more I think about it, I don't know, did not love it.
This is good.
I
I'm
really,
surprised.
really enjoyed this. I actually quite enjoyed The Favourite. I quite like the low-key aspect of it. I think it's nice. It's a very... You're right that it is a more accessible film than the other two. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I
don't think so either. As
No,
long as
sure,
you do
yeah.
something.
I mean, I don't think
Good.
it's better than The Killing of a Sacred Deer or anything like that. But
I think if I'd seen it without seeing the previous two,
Yeah.
it probably might have been different. It's just I went in with that
Yeah.
expectation, you know.
cool. And so that's
That's
you?
it, yeah. I think those are the three ones I've seen recently.
Perfect. So, Grace, what have you seen since last we talked?
I have a couple of new watches, a couple of rewatches, so I'll go through the new watches first. First of all, most importantly, I watched the sequel to A Christmas Prince, The Royal Wedding, which is not in any way about a royal wedding, so I feel very missold, I have to say.
I also watched this, and in the context of the Christmas Prince, we might double talk about
Yeah.
it.
Will
we double
Sarah has
back?
seen it as well. I think so.
Yes.
Because you will have watched this as well, Grace, as part of your Christmas slush award article. Interminable watching of how many films I
You
don't
make
know.
it sound
More
like
to
it's a
come.
bad thing.
No. It just
It's very
sounded
enjoyable, yeah.
quite tiring after a certain point. That's all.
No, it's just yeah. We'll come back. We'll come back to the sequel, or will I talk about it now?
Well, do you want to talk about the original and then talk about the sequel? Does that probably
Yeah,
make a bit
I
of sense?
think that makes sense. So I think we can talk about both in that regard.
Okay.
the
well,
whole Christmas Prince shared universe.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
well, I think you may have talked a bit about the Christmas Prince. So, Jay, you watched the Christmas Prince for the first time.
Yeah, it's a it's a really weird one. I didn't know what to expect, because I've been aware of kind of Hallmark films. Netflix didn't invent this kind of stuff, and these things do exist in a world, even though a lot of people probably think Netflix invented them because people do tend to think these things. But
Youths these days.
kids with their
Never
their-
had the
their
Hallmark
iPods.
channel.
But
He's shaking his fist at the cloud at
Yeah,
people
yeah.
who think La La Land is a musical.
Yes. God damn them. But it's one of those weird things that initially, I was about half an hour in, and I was thinking, I'm not really enjoying this. And I kind of hate everybody in it. And they all speak this weird version of English that's not really English.
It's
Even though
very
it's
much.
English.
It's watching A Christmas Prince and watching most of the other movies like it. It looks like it's been dubbed, which
Yes.
is very strange because
Yeah.
you know that it was filmed in English.
I would also
but it
argue-
has that weird quality where, and it's very common with the actors as well, where it's very clearly ADR, but it's ADR done in a way that's not like Hollywood ADR,
Yeah.
where they do it with the back of the heads. This is the camera is facing the
Yeah.
actor as they're mouthing the words, and it's very clear that they either didn't get the take they wanted, or they just, for the heck of it, didn't get a clean enough sort of edit.
That's good.
And just
And
said,
we'll
screw it,
go
and read
over
the
it.
line again.
And the thing about it is, it creates more of a heightened universe than The Favourite. I would argue because of that, maybe. But what's really interesting about it is that, like anything you watch, if you kind of stick with something long enough, for the most part, you might become invested at some point. Soaps are extremely good at this. All of a sudden you're
The sunk
Jim from
cost
down the
fallacy,
street,
it's
and
like-
then think you want to watch 10 episodes, see that arc resolve itself at some point. Particularly if you're unemployed, which I had a Neighbours period along with 20 years ago, which I ended up. Well, anyway, let's
And
not
then
get
as a
into that.
result, while you're watching those
I-
10 episodes,
and
another set of arcs
yeah,
start,
then
and you're in.
6 months later,
And
and
you're
I
reeled
know
in.
everything about Neighbours. It's tragic. But this has the kind of thing where, all right, it's like Princess Emily's really irritating. Then maybe she's
Until
not
she
all right,
isn't.
and then maybe
Yeah.
she's like, now it's like I want a spin-off film with Princess Emily in it, and it has this kind of weird effect on you that characters tend to do, and it has this kind of strange characters like they're like it has Rose McIver, who's if anybody's seen
iZombie.
iZombie, which I really like, and she's great. So it helps having her to centre the thing because even though she's the worst journalist there has ever
Yeah.
been in the world.
My favorite part is out at the beginning. She talks about how she has to rewrite this article that's 300 words long. Like, this is a massive imposition.
Yeah. Like this
And
is
I'm like,
Pulitzer.
300 words isn't an article; it's a paragraph.
It's a
like,
barely
what's
a
wrong with
tweet.
you?
For Christ's sake.
But this is millennials, Jay.
I know. Listen, I know. And like there is that. And there's a remarkable bit in
Amber
the
isn't
second
just a
film.
terrible, terrible journalist. She's a
She's the-
terrible human being.
There-
Is the issue?
there-
There's one of the moments
Okay,
where
like
why is she a
Amber.
terrible human being?
That's
she-
harsh,
she
Darren.
You've got to stop this.
So she uncovers at one point in the film a secret that will shock this like weirdly continental but also somehow British like royal family to its core. And she's chatting to her friends online, and she's like, I can't possibly expose this. This would shatter the prince and destroy the royal family.
But she's in
and
love.
And you were like, well, hold on. Wait. You are currently posing as the tutor to a girl suffering from spinal bifida.
She's a friend of hers,
In
though.
order to get a scoop.
See,
this is where you draw the ethical line?
Yes.
As someone who hasn't ever seen The Christmas Prince, this sounds fascinating to me.
It is.
So what I've heard so far tonight.
But would you not see that there is kind of a conflict there in that initially when she is not in any way involved or invested in the family, she's like, oh yes, I'll take this this mistaken identity and use this to further my career. But then when she discovers the big twist, she's like, oh, now I have to be reflective and think about what this is actually going to do to people. This is not particularly academic.
Lied to an adorable child.
In fairness,
Just
the
because
child
you're
figures
lying
out
to an
very
adorable
quickly.
hunk doesn't make it any...
Okay, but she's
And-
not
and then
actually
becomes a
lying to
friend.
the adorable child because Emily figures out
Pretty much straight away.
pretty quickly that she's not who she says she is.
Also, I will say that
Also, I love that there's an entire mystery about like the monarchy. Like, there's a whole big thing about if the prince sort of abdicates, who will possibly take the throne?
But they
and
know
you have
who'll
like
take the throne.
No,
Simon will.
Simon is plotting in the background, but it's like you
Simon
shouldn't.
did.
That's the whole point. They all know that it'll go to Simon, and they don't want Simon to inherit the
Simon-
throne. which is
Simon's
why they
Loki,
sit there
right?
being horrified.
Monarchies don't, no, it's Black Panther. It's not Thor.
yeah, but
it's
he is
Black
Loki
Panther.
though.
It's Hallmark's
That's
Black
essentially the
Panther.
whole character, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, even right down to the way he becomes a sympathetic character.
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
sequel.
exactly, right.
Yeah,
And even though you
yeah.
can't really trust them ever. But what I did like, it leans into the... Because you know what's that software that's... You know that the screenwriting one, there's a book that's the basics... Something with
Yes.
the cat. What's it? Who Saved the Cat or something?
Oh,
Or
yes.
That you can write the perfect kind of structured screenplay for Hollywood.
Yes.
Right? This seems, A, that was written that way, B, leans heavily into it, which I really like. It has secret compartments, for Christ's sake. And I love a secret compartment.
And he rescues her from wolves.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And it was only short of a scene with quicksand in it to really take me back into that kind of stuff. And
But
it's
that wouldn't
very,
fit with the Christmas
it's
motif.
very aware of that kind of thing, and I like that about it. I found myself defending it much more than I thought it would. I'm not saying I didn't like it, but it does.
But you can
it's very
defend
weird.
stuff like this because even if you want to call it generic or vapid or uninspired, it is something that never claims or pretends to be anything other than what it is.
It's disposable
and it
fun.
clearly appeals to a lot of people just because it's disposable fun.
Yeah.
And I think
And
there's
it appeals to
merit in
me.
that.
I'm not laying
I know,
into
I'm
it.
saying you're not, but I'm just
Why
saying.
do you hate Christmas?
Yeah.
Darren?
Christmas
Why
is...
do you hate movies?
Darren
Why do
Grinch
you hate A
movie.
Christmas Prince? No, like, there are parts of it I really like. I love, for example, the fact that the coronation is simultaneously, because this is a movie that is a political thriller, a romance, and a Christmas movie, we have a coronation that is simultaneously a coronation, a wedding, and a Christmas party at the same time, to the point where, like, the priest slash monarch
going on
slash, it's like, if anybody here knows why this man shouldn't be king,
I
let him
love
speak
those
now,
things, though.
or forever hold his peace, which I adore. And the moment where the lead, where Amber breaks in, busts into the ceremony and declares, I object, which is like the perfect synthesis of, again, that crossover between wedding, Christmas party, political thriller, which I quite like. It's just, there's a lot of weird stuff in there. There's a lot of really nice, like, how Americans see Europe stuff in there, like Meat Jelly.
I was going to ask, where is this film set?
The fictional name
Aldovia.
of Aldovia.
Okay.
It
It
has an
appears to be
English pub.
simultaneously Britain and also Eastern / Northern Europe.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a strange world. Again, this is
vaguely
Lanthimos'
Germanic
world.
architecture.
Feel to it, like
Yeah.
unintentionally or otherwise. It's a remarkable place that I
Nothing
never
but
want to
forest
visit ever.
palaces and graveyards.
And wolves.
This is-
I'm never going there.
It's Luxembourg.
Yeah, probably.
Luxembourg.
You're probably right. Actually,
But with less
Everybody's
with fewer bankers.
Basically Luxembourg. Yeah.
But you take it on to the Christmas Prince Royal Wedding, which I
Yeah.
watched a couple of days later, which Grace's going to talk
Grace.
about. This is a much stranger beast.
It's very strange. I can't tell whose idea it was to write this particular subplot in because basically, okay, so it's supposed to be about the two of them getting married, which is a year or so after they got engaged on New Year's Eve. Spoilers. Anyway,
I think that'd be a surprise to anyone.
yeah, and for some reason she hasn't moved over to Aldovia yet. So when she does move over,
Well, she has a career that involves a blog with one post on it.
yeah, it's not like you can blog from anywhere in the world with
But
an
she went
internet
viral,
connection
Darren.
or anything.
She had 20,000 hits in the space of 3 days.
Do you hear the friends like that's all you have in the movie anymore? You said you're going viral. It's like that sorts out everything.
Yeah.
That means you're rich now and you don't have to work.
Yeah.
It's
You
amazing.
can
I love that in
monetize
movies.
royalty,
Yeah.
So you can. But anyway, so she moves over and then discovers that Richard is really busy all the time because apparently their king is basically like the French president in terms of the level of power and influence that he has. So that's a bit rough. And then she finds out that he's been trying to modernize the country through this initiative he calls New Aldovia. But for some reason, the country's going broke.
The money's
And
gone missing.
The money just keeps going missing because there's no like auditors or accountants in the entire nation of Aldovia apparently.
Somebody's siphoning off the federal
Somebody is
money of the whole
interfering with
country.
the royal accounts, like something is severely amiss with the royal purse and all this, and it's up to Amber because apparently no one else is capable of getting to the bottom of this accountancy problem.
Also, can I
to
figure out where's the
out-
government? Why is there government that have money?
The
I mean,
Prime
it seems
Minister,
to be
Pure
that
monarchy. Pure
Right?
monarchy.
it's pure monarchy.
No,
like.
there's a prime minister, but he seems to exist primarily to stand around at
He's a
Christmas.
plot point.
Yeah.
He's a plot point essentially. Come in and say a few things and get out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now this takes up most of the film.
Yeah, it's
So
an underlying
kind of-
socialist protests
Yeah, it's
and
kind
stuff
of
like
Is
that.
this
weird.
country part of the European Union?
Yes.
It is. It
They
is.
have the euro, I
This
believe.
is the
the euro.
best
It's
part
on
of
a
the
check.
film.
That's
At the end,
amazing.
it
That,
shows a
that blew
euro.
my mind a little bit.
So it's canonically an EU member state,
Yeah, yeah,
which is the best
for
part
now.
of the
So
movie.
it's not a Britain allegory. In that regard, 'cause
Aldexit,
they're
if you
staying.
will, is coming up.
Christmas Prince 3, yeah.
Yeah, Aldexit.
But then, like, it's just, and then you have this bit at the start too, where she's on Skype with her horrible friends, who are two really brutal people that I don't like, and they've both been laid off because the company that she used to work for, the magazine, has gone bust, and one of them is living at home with her parents because millennials, am I right? And the
Yeah.
other one is working like a night job in a security firm or
Yeah.
something, and it's all very random. And basically, like, they're down in their luck. The entire nation of Aldovia is down in their luck. And Amber's great scheme for figuring this out involves going incognito to a pub and writing the word fishy. on
Yeah,
her
that's one of our
notebook.
notes is fishy. Things are fishy.
so
And she's
weird.
writing her journalist book, fishy.
Yeah.
It's amazing. She's the worst journalist in existence. It's amazing. Also, what I did like about it is
Only
that...
299 words to go then. For the
the second film has its trump card on. That's Rudy. Rudy, here's our dad. Dad comes over. He's like the Brooklyn
part was
diner
recast,
dad. Like,
by the way.
oh, and he wants to help the chef out, who's this kind of stuffy.
Well, to be
European
fair,
chef.
he did crack open the first case with the seed don't fall far from the tree.
Yeah,
and
he's
it's like
classic New York diner chef. You know, oh, what's the matter with you? You know, and he comes over and he's amazing. And him and Emily get on like a house of fire, which is the best relationship in the film.
Yeah.
no, Danielle's a little outside of our budget. We just about got Alice
He's
Cridge.
the poor man's. He's the poor man's.
First Contact.
I know. I was astonished by
Where'd
that.
she go? Yeah.
Well, she had a Christmas
to
Prince
this,
apparently.
Really. It's a very strange sequel. It felt like they decided to be political for the sake of being political, but didn't actually commit to it.
I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, although
Cryptocurrency. What?
Yeah,
Throw that
they
in
have
there.
a lot of weird footage of like strikes, and like at one stage, Emily's school is putting on a play, and the lights go off right in the middle of rehearsal.
And they
because
scab it.
Everyone's gone on strike.
They scab it. They bring it to the palace
yeah.
and do the play anyway. The scabs.
They're just the equivalent of crossing a picket line.
Jay.
Sorry, I know that's not the
just
point.
to be clear, you are a film and a half invested in the Eldovian monarchy,
I know.
and that's where you draw the line.
I have principles there.
Yeah.
Damn it.
But you end up with this weird sort of like to and fro where it's like, oh, we're going to talk about like socialist stuff in inverted commas, and that's about as
Help the
seriously as we'll
people.
take it. But we're also telling a story about an unelected monarchy, so where like the new head of state is just like that person's son.
Yeah.
Give them some credit. They saved some taxpayer money combining all their parties in the first film into like one wedding,
True.
coronation.
Oh, I mean, that
And
that
then
is
at
one
the
of the
end
things.
of it, you get like the worst hen party of all time. And
Oh
then,
my
like, a
god,
two-
it's incredible. It's so bad.
It's so bad.
They
And
must
then,
be
like,
doing
a
it
2-minute
deliberately, like.
wedding, and you know what the real issue is in all of this is that the guy who plays Prince Richard is the most deeply uninteresting,
He's the dullest
uncharismatic,
dullard ever.
Eton graduate that I've ever come across.
2 words that strikes a fear at the heart of any woman.
But it's if you cast somebody who had a bit of like flair to him in that role, then it would have been
Or
even,
an
like,
ounce
it
of
would have been
sex
so much
appeal
more
of
fun.
anything.
There's a moment in the first one where he's introduced and he's stealing the lead. He's stealing Amber's cab, which is like your standard like romantic comedy, like
Cute.
oh
I
antagonistic.
said we'll do
yeah.
it so good. We'll do it in the second film as
But
well.
here's the thing: is that like it when he does that, there's a background extra who like gives it his all. His eyebrows like seem to like trace so far up the back of his head. He's like he's never seen anything like this, and I'm like, cast that guy as Richard. That guy in that one shot has done more to convince me.
This is like the remake.
He's
of,
hungry.
This is the remake of RoboCop all over again, where you have Joel Kinnaman playing RoboCop, who's so dull in that, and then you have Michael K. Williams standing beside him. He's like, "Why isn't Michael K. Williams RoboCop? Why he's right there? He's in the
eyebrow
film.
guy is
he's
our-
in the film.
I
You
do remember
idiots!
thinking
What are
that
you
about
doing?"
RoboCop, and it started and being like, oh, so obviously he's a robot already. And
Yeah. So then you don't just add 10% to him.
Yeah.
Alas, no.
But the thing I like, the Royal Prince, the Royal Wedding, it's kind of terrible and brilliant, often in the same scene, often in the same sentence, which is remarkable. I kind of loved it, and I kind of liked it more than the first one. But it is not even a film, really. It's a
not.
weird
It's an
series of
idea
connected
that
sketches
somebody
that
has thought
barely hang
through.
together.
Are we sure Yorgos Lanthimos hasn't actually
Directed
directed this
these?
secretly?
Both of them are better than the favourite.
Okay.
That's all I got to say about
Interesting.
that.
That's Jay's
I would
scorching hot
politely
take for this
disagree
week.
with that, but
You have not seen the second one, Darren, so you do not even know.
I do not.
Well,
Yep,
at
with
risk
the
of
first one.
sounding really bad, the odds of more people watching A Christmas Prince and its sequels than
Oh, yeah,
the amount of
undoubtedly
people who
Netflix.
watch The Favourite is pretty.
Well, it is on
Awful.
Netflix. It does suffer from that Netflix King movie problem. This is probably the only time anybody's ever going to compare The Outlaw King and Christmas Prince.
Well, I've
But
seen The Outlaw King as well, so I will be talking
They
about
both have
Monarchy.
the same fundamental issue, which is like, I don't know why this guy should be king. In both The Outlaw King and this, there's a moment where the guy goes, I really need to be king. And I've decided in my soul I'm going to commit myself to being king. And the film never bothers to explain why.
What gives you the right?
Why should I be particularly invested in you as opposed to the guy who's rude to the waitstaff? Like, what's your advantage
I'll
here?
get to that.
Okay, fine. All right, cool. What else have you watched, Grace?
Right after that cinematic odyssey, I watched a Korean film called Office, which is very disappointing experience. So this is directed by Hong Won-chan and stars Go Ah-sung, which you may know from Snowpiercer. She played the doll.
Sorry.
Less of that out of you.
Sorry.
Anyway,
That was some piercing commentary there.
This is purportedly about a man who leaves work one evening, goes home and murders his family with a hammer. And the cops are trying to figure out why he did it. And all of his work colleagues are being really weird and sketchy, and they're like, something's going on here. So you're like, grand, interesting.
Not a bad
premise.
setup.
Let's roll with that. And the first maybe half an hour or so of this film is really, really good. Like, there's so many creepy unnerving moments in it. Some really, really good editing, kind of, you know, little pieces of information being delivered right at the moment when they'll have the greatest impact because you know what's going on somewhere else, sort of thing. It's like, it's really, really good, and the writing is very good, and there's lots of suspense and tension, and it's fab.
It really hammers its themes, does it?
Oh God, why? Why are you like this?
Sorry.
Then the rest of the film, it takes a sort of a segue where, like, it's like somebody wrote the first maybe half an hour and then kind of rambled for 10 pages and then decided how they wanted it to end. So the end bears very little relevance to what's gone before, and they have this absolutely ludicrous twist, which if they'd worked it through a bit more and actually tried to connect it to all of the stuff they've just done, it might have made sense, and it might have included room for some commentary on like how crushing the
Hammers
pressure
can be.
cooker of capitalism can be.
Sorry,
the
yeah.
hammer of capitalism,
Yes,
if you
indeed.
will.
There we go.
But they don't
There's
quite.
your Pink Floyd imagery right there.
Yeah, they don't quite go down that line. Instead, they just substitute in another culprit, which I guess you'd probably guess who it is based on one scene, but at the same time, it's kind of like, why?
Yeah.
So I found this just a very irritating missed opportunity, because after half an hour, and I was watching this at home by myself, and the cat was knocking things over in the next room, and it was very unnerving.
damn the cats.
And then, so I was like, oh, right, this is creepy, and then the next hour happened, and it was just grim, so that's unfortunate. I was very annoyed by that. Then I watched on Saturday, what you call it, Free Solo, which I've been really looking forward to. Very invested in this story ever since I watched Valley Uprising on Netflix a couple of years ago, because I find Alex Honnold to be just a very strange, fascinating person. Fascinating because he's so strange. And that's why I think I really loved this. And I find it's one of those things where, you know how you talk about like documentary styles sometimes imitating their subjects, and I think this is one of those things where it's a story of him doing the first free, like
Unassisted.
unassisted ascent of El
Both
Cap
technically and literally, yeah.
Yosemite, which is basically like a sheer rock wall of granite that's very difficult to climb. Obviously, don't recommend it with or without ropes. But anyway, this kind of focuses on his reasons why he wants to do it, like a little bit of background into how he became such a big name in free climbing. But it has these sort of weird... it tells you a little bit about his background, but not very much, like just these kind of little tidbits of information that sort of serve to maybe let you know why he's a little bit strange, but it's almost like they're only there because he felt like he should acknowledge, oh yeah, this is a bit strange about me, that should be there, let's get back to the climbing kind of thing. And in that sense, it's kind of endearing, because I'm sure like you could look at this and think, why is this information here? It has nothing to do with the rest of the story, really. It doesn't even tell us that much about him. But it's so, it to me anyway, it just comes across as such a pure distillation of him and what he's like and his personality. And because I find him very weird and endearing, I found the film very strange and endearing.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say is that he has a very, I don't know if he's still going out with this girl, but if he's not, like, they need to split up pronto, because he's basically this girl that he met at some book signing or whatever, and I don't know if she's actually like this or if they've edited the film to make her look like this, but she keeps talking about how he's climbing, you know, in these really dangerous situations with no regard for his own safety, and why doesn't he care that, like, he has somebody who cares about him, like her, on the ground, and why is her presence not affecting his decision making? And I'm like, well, you kind of knew what he did for a living when you started going out with him, so I don't understand what your point is. And are you really this, like, neurotic, or are they just making you out to look neurotic? Because that doesn't seem very
sounds like an
fair.
edited decision.
Watching the movie, I was not on his side of that particular debate.
But
anyway.
I don't see what the problem is. This is his life. This is what he does. If that's what he wants to do,
I mean-
that's what he wants to do. Don't get involved with someone like that if it's going to bother you.
Did she meet him at a book signing where he's like writing a book about,
About
like,
climbing,
I
how he-
climb dangerous rocks for a living?
Yeah, without ropes. That's my whole like USP.
That's his thing, yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of strange, but overall I really liked it. And also it's obviously breathtaking in terms of the actual footage that it captures in the final climb, which is only marginally made less scary by the fact you know he makes it to the top because there's no obituary. So, you know. Yeah.
That would have been some great PR from the production team, where it was just like,
Will he make it? Yeah.
Nope. Here's some drone footage. Yeah.
is he
Good luck
dead,
with that.
or have we just locked him in a box for the PR circuit? You'll have to watch the movie to find out.
Yeah. Other than that, I'll just run through a couple of rewatches. I watched Miracle on 34th Street, the 1994 version, on Sunday, which I've seen loads of times and I really love. And the only thing that stands out to me now is when you watch it as an adult, you have this new understanding of how it's just dripping in wealth. Like, everyone is so rich. It's like the richest, whitest Nancy Meyers movie you're going to come across. Something that I found very disappointing is the character of Brian Bedford, who's played by Dylan McDermott, is a bit of a nice guy, Didn't notice that when I was a child. Notice it now. That's unfortunate because I really liked him when I was little.
Dylan McDermott's pretty.
Yeah, it's
right?
a red flag. Like when
Yeah.
Dylan McDermott's cast in a role, it's generally he looks like a functioning person, but he's not.
Yeah, that's the difference between watching it when you're like 8 and watching it as an adult. Then The Martian was on telly that evening, which I love. The Martian is great. It's very charming. It's very funny.
Only the second
Shut up,
most
Jay.
What?
only the second most expensive cinematic rescue of Matt Damon. He is a national treasure.
Yeah. We should have left him on Mars, really.
And a musical comedy, according to the Golden Globes.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, we're going to talk about that
Well,
as
it is
well.
comedic, in fairness. But,
Yeah.
but
And there's a lot of music in it, much to his chagrin.
That's true.
a lot of disco music.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's me.
And
Right.
Jay.
I'm actually really lucky this week because both Alex and Grace, I think, are like a quarter of my list, if not a third of it. So thank you very much.
Great minds, yeah.
Yeah, I watched Outlaw King, and I kind of liked it.
So you're on a Netflix royalty binge.
It would appear so. I like Mackenzie. I've heard mixed things about this. I really liked Hell and High Water and a couple of his earlier films. He's an interesting filmmaker. There's a lot of talk about the opening scene, and it's justified in terms of criticism.
the long take.
It's
yes.
like, how much money have I got? Netflix gave me that much? What the hell can we do?
It literally ends with King Edward saying this thing that we're doing is ridiculously pointless, serves absolutely no purpose, and only exists because it's in the budget.
And look at
I
the
feel
size
like
of that catapult!
I feel like he gets a pass on it. I feel like it's a self-aware enough.
I think you're probably right. But it's if you're trying to set up something that's serious and proper, it's perhaps not the greatest opening thing you'll ever do, in my opinion.
Oh no, it's complete. It is gratuitous and excessive and
my
ridiculous.
hopes kind of sank to the floor at that point, in the kind of, oh Jesus, what are you doing here?
Did it make you do a second take after the long take?
Yeah, a little bit. Pine is surprisingly decent, and whilst I'm not Scottish, his accent to my mind sounded okay.
It's not
But I don't-
annoying.
It's
is what
not.
I
It's not.
found.
It's
Yeah,
not. Is
sorry.
it?
It was interesting because I was sort of the similar, and I really liked Hell or High Water. Came along to this with a little wary, and then was kind of like it's not great, but I was surprised.
Solid.
Yeah, solid.
I think it's solid. In terms of why he should be king,
Pine solid.
I don't really care. He looked good naked in a pool. That's okay for me.
And the
He
other
can be-
guy was rude to
Look
the
at
waiting
that guy.
staff.
He looks
He had like
alright.
a 14-year-old wife as well, and I know it's historically accurate and everything, but
Yeah.
when you like Chris Pine,
Yeah.
he's like rocking like an
Jeez.
old grey
yeah.
beard, and he's got
Well,
a
then he was
teenage.
without sin, apparently.
He looks
But,
great with a grey beard, though, in fairness.
He
As
did.
somebody that
Chris Pine
kind of
looks great
enjoys
in
grey
general.
beard. Yes, he does. He
But
really
yeah,
does.
and I think we didn't put enough emphasis on the other guy being rude to the waiting staff. Like the defining
That's
trait
how
was
you know which one's the
yeah,
good guy and which one's
you
the
have
bad
two
guy.
possible kings,
Yeah.
one of which tells the cooking staff to get back in the feckin' kitchen, and the other one is like, hey, maybe we should free Scotland.
I also like the way he like very delicately sort of tiptoed around like this could be a Braveheart sequel in case anyone
Oh, yeah,
really
but
wants
there's
to-
Wallace's arm.
Yeah,
Lest we,
that
make
could
any
be
mistakes.
Mel Gibson's arm.
Well, you know that William Wallace didn't originally appear in the film, in the version that premiered at the
Oh,
film
they cut
festival.
20 minutes, didn't
They cut 20 minutes. This apparently contributed greatly to the reviews, because Jay was talking about how it got a bit of a bad rap when it was initially screened.
And
at-
Netflix let him cut it.
Netflix let him cut it after the
to their
festival screening.
credit, like.
Yeah.
Cool.
And basically, he trimmed 20 minutes, but those 20 minutes included a scene that's referenced in there about meeting Wallace in the woods.
I
Who
kind
played
of,
Wallace,
I
then?
think it's
No
probably
idea,
a good
it hasn't come out
idea
yet.
not to have it. In retro. Like, I think the film plays. I would imagine plays better.
Yeah.
It's sort of tighter, it is, because it's only an hour and 40.
And he's in
Yeah,
the
I-
shadow of this famous this guy who was a lot more
But I
popular.
didn't mind
And
that.
this
Like,
bigger
I like
movie.
that kind of idea that there's a legend kind of thing hanging
Yeah.
over it. I think that quite works. Like, it's solid. There's some fine
I
shots
did
in
find
it.
Wallace's cameo very disarming.
Yes, indeed. There's quite a good bit of restraint here, like in filmmaking. Perhaps probably a little too much sometimes. But like, whilst a lot of the stuff in it has been done before, when something like this is done very well, I think it is done very well for the most part. And as a point is a really good lead. I kind of had a good solid 3-star kind of movie experience, and that's okay. Like, I mean, I know the credits out as an Oscar thing, and that's probably more to do with Hell or High Water having an unexpected kind of run that the year had as well, more so than anything else. But I think it's good, and you know,
you go so far as to say
Braveheart
it's-
hasn't aged well, so let's not come to comparative terms
You go so
anyway.
far as to say it's a great Scott?
Stop, Darren. No, I would not go so far. But no, it's good. It's
Like
okay.
Braveheart still holds up.
Yeah, I would have to watch it again, so I won't know that ever.
But you can listen to the music without watching the film.
I don't listen to film music on its own.
Do you think
Weirdo.
Mel Gibson
I know,
gets
right?
like little bits of the money if you listen to the sound?
Yeah,
on
I-
Spotify, he gets like a quarter of a cent.
I won't-
Somewhere you're
I
fueling
won't
him.
risk it, Alex. I won't risk it.
Right,
Not
listen
now,
to it
not
on
ever.
YouTube.
I don't think you're going to stop Mel Gibson.
Not yet, but I have a plan. Don't you worry, there's a plan cooking up. Speaking of nonsense, I watched Vertical Limit.
Hey!
There's I tell you, there's not enough.
So happy about
Martin
it.
Campbell does not get enough credit as a
Yeah.
filmmaker. Like,
Yeah.
he knows how to put an action sequence together really, really well.
Yeah.
And this, like, I mean, I know, Grace, you're a Chris O'Donnell fan, right? So I won't kick the crap out of him, right?
How dare you?
He is nice and he's a likable enough screen presence, right? In terms of being likable. But he can't really do anything else. Like, he just likable. Do you know what I mean?
Cried in The Three Musketeers. How dare you?
I must
And
rewatch.
Circle of Friends.
Yeah, all
How
right.
dare you?
But nice is pretty much... Like, there's nothing wrong
Yeah,
with that.
he has a
But
very
there's a reason why
pleasant,
it
amiable
career didn't
face.
sustain, I
He
suspect.
looks like this was his second choice after he didn't get into like Take That.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it looks
there
like
is an element to that, there is.
he's like a pop star who became an actor, but he was never a pop
He's the
star.
Mark
It's a very-
Owen of Hollywood.
It's a very weird sensation. Anyway, sorry.
But he's not very good. But he's fine, and he just get away with it. But there's some absolutely terrific sequences of this. As Scott Glenn doing pure
Yes.
Oh
Scott
my
Glenn,
God,
which is
he's
great.
class.
Like, yeah, he's great.
That was the point, which I
Evil
think
Bill Paxton.
And evil Bill Paxton as the rich billionaire. Paxton's great. Plays a good old boy from Texas. He's fantastic. But he's great in everything.
Speaking of what you mentioned there about like potentially having the free solo marketing around whether or not he makes it, I actually remember the Vertical Limit marketing was around. You know that scene where he doesn't have a
jumps.
rope and he like
Yeah.
jumps across
Yeah,
a gap
yeah,
and he has
yeah.
two hammers, but the like trailer would cut just before you knew, and everyone would be like, "Oh my God, we have to go
Yeah.
see this. Does he make it?"
But I did go and see it. That's the thing. Like, I did. But I was like, yeah, I'm in. And,
Like, I saw this in the cinema too.
Yeah, I think I
it's
did.
good. Like, it's fine. The cast of mind. The
cast is great.
It's tense
The
in
cast is
all the
amazing.
right places where it should be, and the action sequences are really good. Fine rewatch. Most
so peak performance for everybody involved.
Yes, Darren. Peak performance. I'll very briefly mention I rewatched Lady Bird again because
Why not?
I've said a lot about it. It's the best film this year by some distance.
So beautiful.
Just briefly mention the thing that came out of this watch was its nature and understanding of depression, anxiety, trauma that's underlying and underpinning most of the characters in the film. I think is really impressive, and that's kind of taken the 3 watches to get through too. So there's many layers there. Some of the best editing I've seen this decade in one of the best films I've seen this decade. I absolutely adore it. So that'll be coming back again, I'm sure.
Here, here.
Our top 10 will be coming in 2 weeks.
Yes, indeed, and it'll be number one. There's
Absolutely
no spoiler.
prizes
It's
for guessing
it'll be number
what our
one.
number one movies.
But the last one I watched then is Love, Simon. Beginning my 2018 catch-up of films I've missed. And this is interesting. I know Ronan has talked about it before in terms of kind of the idea of queer narrative stories being kind of the same generic kind of Hollywood stories that, you know, the rom-coms that have come along. Like that you can just have a story. It doesn't have to be a tragedy. It doesn't have to be whatever.
Yeah.
It can just be a standard.
And the
kind of
value in that.
boy meets girl, but boy meets
Yeah.
boy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and that's fine. And I think that's right. I think it's a really interesting kind of way of looking at it. And in that regard, I think this plays very well. There are some clunky moments and plotting that kind of gets in its way every so often, which kind of mar a little bit. But Robinson, the young guy, I can't think of his first name. Anyway, whoever he is, lead actor, is very, very good. The structure is familiar, but the cast is great. The script is pretty good and has an unexpected emotional depth, actually. Really kind of affecting. And some of the scenes, particularly the parents who are Jennifer Garner and
Josh Duhamel.
and they're really good. And the scenes with them are brilliant. Like, and it
Duhamel
brought tears
was
to
a
the eyes,
revelation in
like.
this, actually, which is surprising.
Yeah. I mean, I thought he was
wouldn't
great.
have thought that.
There was tears. I'm not gonna lie. It really and it earned them, which is the thing. It earned the kind of emotional payoffs. And so, like, there are some scenes that didn't quite work, but I really, really liked it overall.
It's strictly per formula, but it's executed
It is,
very,
but it's
very
well
well.
done
And I
within
mean,
the film. Yeah,
everybody working on the film
Yeah.
is doing the best job that
Yes,
you could imagine
it's the best
doing.
version of this film that
it could
there be.
possibly be, which I
absolutely
really,
agree
really
with
like
that.
about it.
Yeah, so do I. Actually, I really liked it. So yeah, that's the beginning of my proper 2018 catch up. It's going to be manic in the next 2 weeks. Whew, that's me.
All right, cool.
I'm tired just thinking
Oh,
about
who you telling?
I sort of had 2 streams of watches, one of which was rewatches, and one of which was catching up for 2019,
good
the
Jesus.
annual awards screener binge. So what did I watch? I watched Beautiful Boy, which is the Amazon movie with Steve Carell
yeah.
and
Timothy.
Chalamet. If I were being rude, I would say the movie is Timothy Chalamet, but it's an interesting film. It's a very earnest, very ambitious, very hard on its sleeve kind of film. It's a portrait of addiction based on 2 memoirs that were written by father and son, detailing a son's addiction to crystal meth. The only issue with it is that it is never entirely sure what it wants to be, and so ends up trying to be three different things at the same time. One of them is a standard prestige piece, which is based around the performances of Carell and Chalamet, and that's very much like, I'm shouting right now because I'm very emotional, sort of stuff. It's almost, and I mean, they're both good
Oscar
actors.
clip.
That's
Yeah,
exactly. It's a collection of Oscar clips. There's a moment where, like, you were supposed to protect him! That sort of stuff going on in the background. And it doesn't really...
Just makes me tired already.
And there's nothing wrong with that if you do it well, but what happens is it tries to mesh it with two other things. One of the other things that it tries to mesh it with is the Sundance film. So it's
my worst nightmare.
Yeah, so it's a gigantic musical montage filled
Oh,
with the music of
jeez.
David Bowie
No!
and like John Lennon and stuff like that,
No!
Beautiful Boy, and it's all mixed together. Like there's albums on the wall, and you hear those albums on the soundtrack, and it's like Rocky IV, like to the extent that like 70% of it is montage, except somehow we got to pause so we can have these big chunks of like Oscar clip moments in there, and
Jesus,
it
this
doesn't
sounds
really
horrible.
work. Don't worry, that's before we get onto the third and most exciting mix in this like Oscar season margarita, which is the exploitation 50s moral panic movie. There is a moment in this film, and I kid you not, when Steve Carell discovers that his son has been taking crystal meth, the synthesizer drones heavily on the soundtrack. He sits in a darkened room and with a neon blue light gazing over his features as his eyes widen in horror. He visits a doctor. The doctor points him at an MRI scan. There are 3 red circles on the brain. The doctor says to him, "You see these? The amygdala. It's screaming." This is intercut with a sequence in which Steve Carell leafs through his son's journals, set to this ominous synth soundtrack. Page after
Jesus.
page after page of his son succumbing to
I love
addiction.
meth. I love meth.
Illustrations of demons and devils drawn in thick black ink. Writing that starts initially very clear and starts scrolling slowly and slowly round in a whirlpool of like depression and angst and darkness. And it's...
I really want to see
It sounds
this.
like that scene in MacGruber, when he's seen someone's license plate and then he like gets obsessed and the guy finds his journal and it's the license plate over and over again and it gets dark and twisted.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's these 3 things and none of them work well together. And it's I feel bad that I have this reaction to it because it's so well-meaning and so earnest and it's trying so hard, but it just doesn't click.
I really want to see this. This sounds dreadful. Utterly dreadful.
Much better was Boy Erased, which is Joel Edgerton's movie about gay conversion therapy. I haven't seen the Miseducation Cameron Post, to be clear, going into this. It's a very standard, very conventional film. It's very much a standard Oscar film in many
I
ways.
heard
shape,
mixed
and
things
forms.
about this.
Yes, it's very conventional in terms of how it's written and in terms of how it's directed. The most innovative thing that Edgerton does in terms of direction is he approached it very similar to how he did The Gift, in that he treats it as something close to a horror movie, where he keeps ratcheting up the tension and the dread as you run through it. Where there's this
The Gift made me angrier than I think any film in the past couple of years, because I remember watching
But
it
the
and being
ending.
so 200% on board. I'm like, this is great, this is so good.
Yeah,
and then the
you
ending
hit the
happened,
ending.
and I was just like, what?
I know.
The fuck?
I did like it, but I
Yeah,
did
the
that.
ending
There's
is
it's
Joel,
yeah.
it's a bit
I can't look at you.
bit of a
Wow,
doozy.
I just
Well,
can't.
if it makes you feel better, I'm thinking more of the directing of the 200% that you were on board for.
Good.
Um,
That's great.
But yeah, and it works relatively well, but it hits all the standard beats. It's a boy who had these sexual experiences with men who's sent to this conversion therapy. It explores like how that's an industry, how there's no actual qualifications behind it, the damage that it does psychologically that people go through it. There's confrontations with his mother, who's played by Nicole Kidman, who is also very good, who comes to terms slowly with, her son's sexuality and what that means in terms of her religion. There's the confrontation with the father at the end, which is played by Russell Crowe, who is less accepting, and it hits all of the beats along the way. Lucas Hedges is very, very good in it.
He's a pretty good actor.
He's a pretty great actor, to be entirely honest. He'll be featuring on all of on my top 10 as well as your top 10s, I believe, as well when we get to the end of the year. I also finally saw The Hate You Give as well, which was a film that I've been meaning to catch up on but didn't get a chance to, which is the film it's based around. It's inspired by the Black Lives Matters protest. It follows a woman named Star, a girl named Star, who witnesses a boy that she grew up with getting shot by the police during a stop and search, and through that process becomes engaged politically with this idea of protests and civil rights protests in the States as they exist at the moment. There is a bit, it suffers a little bit from being very heavy-handed, and this is something that I've talked about with, I know I've talked about with Jay off mic, and I've probably talked about it elsewhere as well, where there's this interesting thing where when you watch something And you wonder about the audience, and you wonder how aware the audience is of things that's being explained to them. Because a lot of the stuff that The Hate You Give explores would seem self-evident, I think, to a lot of particular viewers, particularly along a certain side of the political spectrum or of a particular age.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's value in articulating that, particularly for older audience members or for audience members who aren't particularly engaged. So you have a lot of like white students who are painfully oblivious to issues of race in America. And I suspect that that's not entirely inaccurate. But it does occasionally feel like the film sort of slows down and becomes a little bit heavy-handed in how it explains and explores and approaches those things. On the other hand, it is a set of tremendous performances. It's got a fantastic... Imelda Stanberg, who plays the lead role of Star, she's very good. But she's ably supported by a wonderful cast, including Regina Hall, who's garnering a lot of attention for Support the Girls at the moment. Yes, massively underrated, and glad to see her transitioning out of the sort of like comedy sort of ghetto in which she sort of found herself. But people like Anthony Mackie, Common is in there as well. It's a very good cast. It's very earnest, but I mean, as far as young adult adaptations go, it's very good. It is just a little bit heavy-handed in places. In terms of other stuff I watched that I caught up with, I rewatched BlacKkKlansman, which is still fantastic. It's my third time watching it, I think, and it's still a fantastic piece of television, and the ending still hits, which is remarkable. When you've
the end is remarkable.
seen it twice and you know it's coming, and it still gets... I mean, you've seen the ending more than twice, to be entirely honest, but you've seen the ending in the context of the film.
But I stuck with me. I've only seen it once, and I will get to it at some point, probably won't be till next year again. There's a sequence in it, I think, that's been kind of either misinterpreted or misunderstood, and that's the sequence where there is a kind of a sting.
Yes, involving the racist police officer. Well, it's the one that Boots Riley was very, very adamant against. So we'll be talking about Boots Riley later in the podcast.
Yeah, but I when I watched it, I remember thinking that this almost played out in a kind of heightened fantasy universe, this scene. That this is what things would be like in an ideal, proper world.
And what our film's for imagining that.
And then when it gets to the point where you get to the end, it's like, this is what it actually is. Yeah. So it's not like, I'm not saying necessarily that didn't happen, but even the heightened way it's shot and filmed, it's very much almost satirical.
Well, I mean,
it's one at the end of Taxi Driver. You're almost wondering,
exactly. That's exactly
happening?
What it is. Yeah. I think there's an element to that too.
I mean, one of the central themes of BlacKkKlansman is the idea of art and how art allows us to enable to view the world and stuff. And in particular, how white America has like basically normalized a way of looking at the world through its art form. Most obviously in that sequence involving, the Birth of a Nation.
Yes.
But there's even the discussion of Blaxploitation films, which is this wonderful long take that's intercut with the posters and stuff like that. And there's a sense that Lee is sort of dealing with that idea, the question of like, if we can convince people, or if you can enter and influence culture in a way that the message of the culture shifts slightly, isn't that inherently a good thing, even if it's not a reflection? Even if it's not a reflection of how things actually are.
I think there was an implicit sense of that as well in the whole, like the way it sort of seems to explore allies and the necessity of having allies, and because I know like what we
it's dedicated to a white woman who died.
Yeah, because we had that whole conversation, I think, after it came out about like who it was for and how there had been that discussion about whether or not it was being too sympathetic towards police officers knowing systemic racism there, and how that like it makes, to my mind, a rather earnest pitch for the need for there to be sympathy on not on both sides. There needs to be allyship, basically. And I think that has gotten a bit lost, perhaps, in the mire. But that feeds into what you were saying about that whole, if you can enter into culture in a certain way and influence it and raise a voice, isn't that kind of widening your circle of influence in a good way?
Yeah. And it seems to be getting a lot of awards attention as well, which is good.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit...
Which is very good. Well, I mean, that provides a nice segue if we're ready to jump in.
I'm ready.
Were you born ready, Jay?
I'm born ready there.
To the Golden Globe nominations announced today, which are probably the big one because award season grinds on. But yes, BlacKkKlansman did get a Best Dramatic Picture nomination.
It was very dramatic, in fairness to her.
A lot. That wasn't what. That was not being sarcastic.
No,
that was my radio announcer voice.
I was fully like, At least it wasn't a musical or comedy or something like that.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Oh God, right?
Oh yeah. So let's talk through the major motion picture drama nominations. 5 nominees. One of which is Black Panther, which we're all very glad to see. One of which is BlacKkKlansman, which I think we're all very glad to see. Yeah. One of them is If Beale Street Could Talk. Now, I know Jay was disappointed with this. But
I liked it, so I don't want to kind of be too hard on it, but I probably maybe expecting a little more than I got, I guess. It's very beautiful and very interesting, but yeah.
if Beale Street Could Talk is not going to be the controversial nominee here, we have two of them, in fact. One of them is Bohemian Rhapsody, and the other one is A Star Is Born. Nominated
Where's
under
Ronan for this?
drama.
Hugely divisive musical.
Well, first of all, like, let's detach A Star Is Born. Bohemian Rhapsody being nominated at all is
That's
is
a weird
quite
one.
surprise.
Yeah.
It's kind of dead on arrival. Like, I mean, the interesting thing is, I think
But also, surely that's a musical.
Yeah, it's the
Of
very
anything.
definition of
If
a
we're going to give
musical.
it any award,
Yeah.
which I don't know.
Isn't it a biopic though?
It is, but it's a
is,
biopic
but
with
there's a lot of music in it.
there.
Wasn't the what the thing get? Did that get a nomination? The Johnny Cash one, Walk the Line. What
Walk
did
the
that
Line?
get?
I don't know.
Because that won the
But
Best
isn't-
Picture. Yeah, it was in for
does-
Best Picture. So
Bohemian Rhapsody use music to tell part of the story in the same way that A Star Is Born does. Because
Well,
A
it's
Star Is
very
Born is
heavily
certainly a
it's
musical.
it's very heavily implied in Bohemian Rhapsody that he wrote. Never mind the fact that Who Wants to Live Forever was written for the soundtrack of Highlander. The film seems to imply that this is Freddie Mercury dealing with his AIDS
Yeah,
diagnosis.
they even like they repurpose songs and
Yes,
like
to
incorporate
bring them
them
into
in
the
and like even
narrative.
play with the timing of stuff. It's
Yeah,
really, I mean, they
like,
probably earned their musical credentials, but like it is definitely not
like
a good
Under
film.
Pressure was recorded 8 years before it's used in the film.
When he is in fact under
pressure. Like the entire use of it is not to
Jeez.
reflect the fact that he was meeting David Bowie in Switzerland and they decided to hang out and record. It's like, no. In case you don't get what Freddie Mercury is at the moment, he's under pressure.
Yeah.
Do. Anyway, but yeah, it's very
But
much.
this could be one of those, like, you know the way they just do this sometimes in award season where they just decide, for instance, that somebody is like a lead actor even though they're a supporting
Yeah.
actor and vice versa. And like sometimes people just go, no, this is what we're going
Also,
for. And like it makes no sense, but people just roll with it.
Well, this is the Winslet sort of like cynical category manipulation, where like Winslet was pushed as
Or
a supporting
the DeCap's
actor.
one where DeCap's put himself a supporting actor in The Departed, but lead actor in Blood Diamond.
Yeah. Yeah, Winslet did the same for, I think she was lead actor in Revolutionary Road, supporting actor in The Reader, and somehow managed to get a lead actress nomination for The Reader. And they do it this year as well. They're doing it with Olivia Colman as lead actor for The Favourite, but Stone and Vice are supporting actors.
can I make a point though?
I'd flip that nearly.
Yeah. Anyway,
Like these are the Golden Globes. Nobody gives a flying fuck about the Golden Globes, even in award sense.
One thing I will say is
The
that all
online,
allowed sit
wherever
there-
online film critics things are, it doesn't matter where
thanks,
it's
Jay.
from. Not
I appreciate that.
in the world. You can have the New
No one
Zealand
cares.
online film critics.
Nobody cares
the crap.
about. Yeah.
The only
Compared
thing I
to
care
everybody,
about-
is more important than Golden Globes. The only lower than the Golden Globes is the Grammys. They're literally the bottom
Do you
run
guys
of
know
everything.
how the
only
Hollywood
thing I care
phone?
about the Golden Globes, though, is that they're all allowed to sit there at tables that are very close together, and they're all allowed to drink.
Yeah.
very close.
That-
So it's every now and then you actually get an entertaining.
No, but it's
show where
fun.
somebody's off
But
their
it's
tits.
not good, is
Yeah.
my point.
But well, do
But
we?
that justifies its existence.
Okay.
Are we
It's
aware of
existing.
how the Golden Globes operate?
Well, it's a foreign press that
Hollywood
pick
foreign
whatever.
press
They pick
Do you know-
people that will
Do you
turn
know
up
how
to the-
many Hollywood how many members of the Hollywood Foreign Press there are?
There's not many, is
Five.
there? There's like
More, but-
80 or something, isn't
Yeah,
there?
that's it. It's 91,
Really?
I think. Yeah.
91 people. are
91,
voting on these.
including people who write for like the Times of Israel, for example. It's
Sweet.
like, yep. It's and like a couple of small French newspapers as well. Like it's really it's a
an
really
odd,
eclectic
weird
bunch.
thing.
Um,
and it's
and
very flattering to Hollywood, and Hollywood loves them.
That's it exactly. And the thing is that they, for
All
example,
award ceremonies like that.
But these are
They're
particularly
brilliant.
so.
well, last year they
Solved AIDS.
they very much overhyped the what was it called, All the Money in the World, because they were the only critics group allowed to see it.
Yeah.
They were
And-
basically
and-
given their own select screening introduced by
And
Ridley Scott.
they did the tourist a few years ago, if I remember correctly. Remember that,
Yeah.
that they picked that up.
Um,
That abomination of a film.
But yeah, but it does represent a sort of a solidifying of the race to a certain extent. Interestingly enough, and I feel like this is somewhat under discussed, given like we just talked about the two musicals that are inside like the drama category. That means that Vice is trapped inside the musical or comedy category.
Okay, remind me what Vice is.
Vice is Dick
Fat
Cheney,
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale.
Dick Cheney, the movie.
I don't
Grim.
care for this film at all.
But it's directed
The
by
idea
Adam
of it-
McKay, so somehow
Yeah.
it's a comedy.
Have you guys seen it?
I have not seen it yet.
It
I'm
looked
looking forward-
grim.
I'm
It kinda
looking
looks-
forward to it. I'm on
Fat
could be
board.
good,
Christian
but
Bale,
it's
Dick
going to be
Cheney, Adam
depressing.
McKay.
Oh, of course it is. It's not going to be a comedy. Like, I do love the idea that, like, the entire 21st century history of America is a comedy, according to the Golden Globes.
I wish Christian Bale had stopped doing weird things to his body for Oscars.
He'll
It's
be dead
embarrassing
soon.
and not edifying at this stage.
I don't mind. I figured, look,
I have to say though, this kind of lunacy is exactly why I actually have quite a lot of time for the Golden Globes. It's a ridiculous.
It is. No, it is.
thing. Compared to the Oscars, which is so stuffy and dull and generic, at least with this you might get the occasional bit of crack.
That's
Due
true,
to
you do.
aforementioned alcohol and these mental categorizing of things.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
At least it's entertaining.
It's true.
I see the Green Book is also being considered a comedy.
A comedy as well, which is...
That
well, I mean,
didn't look like a comedy.
I've seen it for my
Okay.
sins. It's very broad, very it's the best movie about race made in 1993. Which is it's really, really uncomfortable. It features a stereotypical Italian American who is taught respectability politics by a well-educated black man. There's a moment where Marsala Ali tells Viggo Mortensen, who's doing an "Hey, forget about it" performance, he's like, why you gotta bother me with this? And he's like, frankly, because you could do better. Which is really, really uncomfortable. And it builds to a moment in the rain where Marsala Ali declares, if I'm not black enough, and I'm not white enough, and I'm not mad enough, Tony, then tell me, what am I? What am I? As the rain pelts down, it's very much like...
And he's like, forget about it.
Hey!
Oh,
hey,
big a meatball.
yeah.
I'm walking here.
No, there's literally a sequence in which he eats.
Oh my
His
God.
wife makes 2 meatball subs, one for him and
Of
one for the
course
man
he
he's
does.
driving, and he eats both of them on the road.
Can I just say, it's really weird looking at these awards and you see like Adam McKay and Peter Farrelly in the Best Director list, and you're going,
Yeah, that Farrelly
lads,
thing
would
was
you
great."
stop? Will you stop pretending these are directors? Would you stop?
Whoa!
Come on,
McKay.
come
Okay, look, I'll
on.
give you Farrelly. Farrelly's direction is not particularly good.
On.
You're
Stop
obsessing,
it.
Jay.
Stop it.
I love
Just
how
stop it,
you
Golden
turned
Globes, you
into
crazy
Tony for a
bastards.
second there. Forget about
Oh.
it. Hey, ooh.
How would you have done me all day?
Peter Farrelly, huh?
Other pasta sauces are available, of course.
We're gonna get so much hate.
We're
about it,
already
you
in
guys. We've
trouble.
gotta stop.
I'm like the Italian guy in
And
Brooklyn.
somehow we are more...
You leave him out of it.
He's a bad
And
man.
somehow this is a more sensitive portrayal of the Italian American community than anything featured in Green Book.
Oh! Sorry, that's the last.
Sorry, this is
That's
too
the
much.
last one. That's the last one. That's the last one.
I was just listening to a podcast about like the Mad Axemen of New Orleans, who primarily targeted Italian Americans.
Whoa!
The Mad Axeman is an
Forget
incredible
about it.
story. It's an incredible
I'll
story.
check that
Well,
out.
some of the theories that they came up with are fascinating.
Yeah.
Come down to the Bronx and see you. That's sorry. I'm stopping.
Okay.
Stop now.
Jesus.
All right. In terms of Irish movies abroad, Lee Cronin's The Hole in the Ground has secured multiple international
Oh,
deals
In terms of Irish nominees, Katrina Balfe is nominated for a Golden Globe.
for Outlander, is it?
Outlander.
Which is great.
That's great.
Is it?
And
I
she's
hope that
great in it.
fandom finds happiness. I really, really do.
I watched 4 episodes of Outlander and I was like, no.
I just remember William Shatner
No.
starting a fan war. That's
yeah,
all I
don't know
remember.
how that happened, but if
Shatner? Well, yeah, William Shatner's an Outlander fan,
As with
and he
most
has strong
things-
opinions about the show.
As with most things, if you pay no attention to the internet or the discourse, you will enjoy it.
I started watching it before, like when it came out, like so I didn't know anything about it. And no.
It is a very slow burn, but once it grows on you.
All right. Well,
But I do appreciate the irony of saying that in an era when we often talk about how if you don't get into a show within like 2 episodes, you're like, no.
40 minutes. I'm
There's
out.
like 4 million other things.
Yeah,
you can watch.
there's like 100 shows started since we started this conversation.
Have you tried? Have you tried it again? Have you watched it a couple of times? Have you given it a proper chance?
Yes.
But yeah,
I
the whole.
just think Outlander is such a slow burn. Like once you get to the point where you're invested, you have a lot of affection for the way it's been built up. But especially in this day and age, the pace of storytelling is very, very slow, and that's probably not going to endear it to.
It's
a lot of people.
showrun by Ronald D. Moore, if I remember correctly.
I do
He's
like Ronald D.
responsible
Moore.
for Battlestar Galactica and Star Trek Deep Space Nine and stuff, so it's always worth a look. Lee Cronin's The Hole in the Ground has secured multiple international deals.
A24 in the
A24 and
States, which is,
DirecTV in North
yeah,
America. Yeah.
So
Which
just
bodes very,
it
very
really
well.
does.
Well, A24, I think the last film or two that I was looking forward to, because it had their branding on it, was not good, but I can't remember what the film was now. Anyway, I'm still excited.
Are you thinking of Hereditary?
Yes.
I will
Boom,
say
got it,
though,
I'm
if you have access to US Netflix, they've the A24 slate of films
That's
which is pretty good.
pretty great.
Yeah. Not that I'm saying you should do anything illegal to do that. But just saying that sometimes the American Netflix can fall into your lap,
Jay?
so to speak.
Every
Forget
now and then
about
you
it.
wake up and
Oh.
Also, The Favourite scooped a record 10 awards at the
Boo.
BIFA Awards 2010 with Rachel Weisz.
The British Independent
And then Film
blah, blah,
Awards.
blah.
Oh,
I know.
fuck.
British film.
British Independent Film Awards.
Yeah, this is
This
British.
is one of those
This is a
things
hybrid film. So
where-
the Brits claim
one
it,
of those-
Ireland claims it,
Yeah.
Greeks claim it, everybody claims it.
Well, we live in a multinational age. It's not a bad
fairness.
thing.
I
And
I wouldn't claim this.
Fine. That just
Sorry.
leaves more of it for me.
It does indeed.
All right, so let's move on to talk about the top 10.
Woohoo!
Really,
Sorry.
Jay?
I'm
Very
high on
funny.
life.
Jay is
I'm
very,
high on
very
life, Darren.
Indeed.
Okay. And okay,
Go on.
that is more like it. So at number 10, Nativity Rocks.
I did not hear about this one at all.
Guys, I have never
This is
seen
like
a
the
nativity
fourth
film, and there's like
film
10
in
of
the
them.
Nativity series, that
Has anybody
originally
seen
had
them? Any of
Martin
them?
Freeman
Yes.
10 years ago.
And we sort of downgraded a little bit as we've gone. This one has Celia Emery, Anna Chancellor, Helen George, and Ruth Jones. It doesn't have a plot synopsis, though. It has earned €68,000 at the Irish box office to date, which is pretty
They're
decent.
relatively popular, aren't they? Like, people go see them every year, remarkably, like, no man's business.
Easy, stupid.
They
entertainment
probably
to
are.
know yourself.
Yeah.
We have what appears to be a Bollywood entry at number 9, 2.0, which is S. Shankar's story about facing a threat that is beyond the current understanding of science. The government, in capital G, seeks the help of scientists. Dr. Vasagarin suggests to assemble Chitty to fight against it. I have no idea who Chitty is. But yes.
I want them on my team.
But it does look very much like it's sort of a Tamil Hindi sort of
Okay,
superhero film, which is interesting.
Darren's going to watch it.
I'm going to keep an eye on that one.
We know Darren's going to watch it, everybody. No spoilers here. He will watch it. He will watch anything.
Indian cinema's
He watches
fantastic.
anything. There is nothing he won't watch.
At number 8, Darren has seen this. Darren
You
has
see?
loved this. It is Widows.
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen it yet?
But it is on my list to see.
It's on my list as well. I almost went to see it, but Savoy had some sort
Technical
of
hitch.
technical hitch
And you
yesterday.
missed out on another film as well.
I haven't seen Creed 2 either.
But don't worry, that won't come up later. Or maybe it will.
No, I will
went
get
to
to see Widows.
last Friday, and I stayed in and watched the Christmas Prince sequel instead because I'm a bad person.
Good choice.
So yeah.
Well done, you.
Come on, I mean, you can watch Widows anytime. But Christmas Prince is
It's there
now
at
Christmas-
home.
There on
Yeah,
Netflix.
it's
I
right
didn't
there,
actually
right
have-
now. Nobody's judging you, Grace.
I will hopefully see Widows this weekend. I'm really, if it's still
Widows
around.
is great. It's probably my second favorite of the awards kind of fair that I've seen so far, and is just as likely to do well as my favorite. Of
And
the
it's
whole
not
bunch.
getting any
It's
awards.
not getting any love, not at all.
Like
It's
Viola
a shame.
Davis, which is a shame.
It is. It sort of died, which is a shame. It's doing well internationally. It's so far at the Irish box
Oh, that's
office
good.
earned over €500,000.
That's good. I'm glad to hear
which is
that.
pretty good. It's just a shame that it didn't make much impression on its original release. I don't think we'll be saying that about number 7, which is Robin Hood.
Luke's description of it
Yeah, it
was
didn't
more than
exactly
sufficient for me.
engender me.
No.
He's talked about, like, Luke was so angry at this that he didn't even get out all his bile. He passed on a note to say that
Good God.
to ask us to point towards, and I quote, the church casino night in the film, which
Oh.
somehow makes me more want to see it just a little bit more.
Darren will
Is
see this
having
film.
the impact on you that Venom did on me. Like when Luke
little bit
described
curious.
Venom, and I was like, "Wait a minute,
You still haven't seen Venom, though, right?
I'll get to it."
It's on the list.
You know, like a year from now, I'm like, "Guys, remember Venom?"
When we can watch it,
Like, what? That's a film?
but we can watch it free from the hype.
Yeah.
At number 6, having earned €5.1 million at the Irish box office today. By the way, the film's most successful market per capita, A Star Is Born. We love this movie. We love this
Wow.
movie more than the Americans
We,
love
as
this
in.
movie.
Oh,
as a
you
nation.
mean the nation? All right.
Collective nation.
Yeah.
All right.
The Irish people, we embrace
Just not me.
We've spent more money watching this movie per head of population than any other country on
We are
earth.
such a weird country.
We, just
We have
love
our
Lady
kind of-
Gaga, you guys.
We have a very strange obsession because I can't see the connection there. Like,
Musicals, like music tends to do well, though.
Look at the ABBA movies,
The ABBA, yeah, the ABBA movies. They were also big.
But they're
big
also
numbers.
great.
but they're hi-oh indeed.
Sorry.
At number 5, it's another musical, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Ooh.
Oof, yeah. It's
You've
like,
seen this, have you?
I have, and what I would sort of liken it to is, you know, the way Disney are sort of like plummeting through their old like animated films to make like new CGI friendly versions of them, and that's kind of what it feels like. It's someone like read the Wikipedia page for Freddie Mercury and was like, you know what I could do with this, and just completely took out any edge to it. And for someone who's sort of so personal, like so over the top and so kind of this incredible personality that led to all this like really iconic music, it's just very, very strange to see this like hyper sanitized big 3D version of the film that it just like and the dialogue is so bad to the point where he sort of, when he reveals to his bandmates, you know, that he has AIDS and it does, the future doesn't look good, and one of them just says to him, "You're a legend, Fred," and you're like, oh god,
You're a wizard,
wizard.
Harry.
Yeah.
We all went to the same place.
But I mean,
Yeah.
like, one of the things that's interesting about Bohemian Rhapsody, which is kind of, and I think speaks to Queen as a band, is that it, on the one hand, you have this story that is weird and gonzo and bizarre. I'm thinking of, like, Freddie Mercury's birthday party in Ibiza. I'm thinking of the launch party for Jazz, for example. But you also have the fact that, like, as I think Brian May describes it in the film, it's like you want a song that the audience can clap along to. You have a very sanitized and very like they're a very broad church, so to speak, and you have this like paradox between, and you have this weird sort of like modern blockbuster theme and dialogue sort of thing where it's like, what are Queen? They're a bunch of outcasts who play to the people at the back of the room, hoping they'll be heard by other outcasts. Yeah. And you're like, is that really what the biggest band in the world is? I feel like that's a bit of a... I feel like you're not entirely selling this very well.
And it also comes across because it's very clear, I think, that it's the surviving members of Queen are dictating how this film is to be built.
Two of them, anyway, as well. Like,
this happens a lot, though, in kind of authorized kind of
like, there's
films.
a ridiculous scene where they're having their inevitable fight, and instead of just... Like, Freddie Mercury turns to Brian May and says, "Where would you be without me?" And instead of saying nowhere, he says, "You'd be a doctor with theoretical physics, working in success." And you're like,
you'd have
wait
written
a
a
minute.
groundbreaking paper that would have changed the way that people see science.
So he's literally writing the script.
Yeah. And look at you, Taylor. You'd be a successful dentist. And then there's Deacon, who is not involved in the screenwriting process in any way, shape, or form, so nothing comes to mind.
Then there's Deacon, who invited you?
Yeah, there's a moment at the start where he meets them at the truck, and they're loading stuff into the back of the van, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a big fan of you. You study astrophysics. You must be the smart one." And Brian May, producer of the film, goes, "I guess I am." And there's a moment where Roger Taylor says, "I can't be doing this every Saturday night. I've got things to be doing. I can tell them your name. I can tell you their names if you want."
Yeah.
Says Roger Taylor.
He knows lots of girls. Yeah,
Yes.
put that in the screenplay.
Yes.
Like, oh god,
Why are we still talking about this?
Okay, fine. Do you want to guess how much money this has earned at the Irish
It's
box
done
office?
well. Yeah, it's
Too much, far too much.
That's not actually a figure, but
Far too much.
I'll give you like if we're
$20.
This is like an over under.
I'll go.
50
Yeah,
euro.
2.5. I'll say.
over.
Really? Okay.
Yep, 2.9. Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Jesus.
2.981.
Mad
It
people.
will cross 3 million this weekend.
Not with my money, you won't.
At number 4, and don't worry, I'm sure this will turn around the top 10 for you, Jay.
Yes.
Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald.
What's number 3?
Did we peak last week when we just talked about Jude Law as Hot Dumbledore? There's nothing else to note about this movie.
But he
probably is-
doesn't
that's
wear
probably
the
it, isn't it?
robes. Like, I feel like
But
Jude
he
Law
is
in a
wearing
muumuu.
three-piece suit.
Jude Law in a muumuu.
You saw that like tenure thing of like pre-tenure, post-tenure, and they have a picture of like Jude Law in a natty suit, and then got tenure, and he's like wearing purple
Can't fire me.
robes with stars on them.
I'm happy to put the boot into Johnny Depp if we want, though.
Always happy.
Always happy to sing to new depths.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. That happened the same weekend the first one was released. So I remember being in the cinema and watching it, and it being Colin Farrell, and me being like, "Hey, Colin Farrell's finally getting like a big franchise,
Yeah, I
love
like
Colin
payday
Farrell.
deal." And then it's like, "Oh, it's Johnny Depp," and it's like, "Wait,
This
this
is
week, this is the
tremendously-
same week that the recording of his domestic violence thing."
It was
sort of,
a twist in the way they did not intend.
Yeah, I mean, like that was a great. We talk about like locking the guy from Free Solo in a vault. This was like something that the PR people at Warner's,
Maybe he just doesn't transform. Yeah, maybe we
It's
look at that Colin
such a-
Farrell contracting.
It's such a downgrade, though, isn't it?
Really is. It's trading now. At number 3, and unlikely to be going anywhere this side of Christmas, it is The Grinch.
Yeah. I might see this over Christmas. I have a niece who will be bored over
Aw.
Christmas, so I'll probably end up going to see this and some other animated film that's coming out soon. Spider-Man thing.
Into the Spider-Verse. That's previewing
out.
this weekend, but
Yeah,
we're
it's
going
in
to
the
talk
weekend.
about that in a moment.
Oh, okay.
At number 2, Wreck-It Ralph 2. Ralph Breaks
That's
the
the other one.
Internet.
I'll probably end up seeing
Okay.
this as well.
I went to go see this one the other week and really liked it. It's a very, very sort of pro-capitalist consumer, lots of ads kind of stuff. But it does know that.
Is it the
It's only
Emoji
thing.
Movie?
It's not. Well, it's like taking what the Emoji Movie kind of nearly wanted to be and doing it slightly better. It's doing it slightly archly. It's actually very well pitched for a kids' film because it sort of plays wonderfully with all these this branding literally all over the film, but that's kind of the point. And then at the heart of it, there are actually two very kind of well-drawn characters and who are really well voiced by John C. Reilly and Sarah Silverman, and it's so well constructed from, it's not quite Pixar levels, but it's a solid movie, and it's a very solid sequel. So yeah, I actually really like this one.
It's interesting how like Disney purchasing Pixar seems to have brought the quality of Pixar down, but brought the quality of Disney up.
Yeah, that's true actually. Yeah.
I seem to have actually learned so, and you've ended up with this. Jay's like, I liked it the way it was. Thank you very much.
I did. Yeah.
Right, do you want to guess what number 1 is?
Creed!
It is indeed Creed 2.
Good.
Having earned €303,000 at the Irish box office
Getting
to date. It is, yes, I have seen this, and it is a great sequel to Rocky IV and an adequate sequel to Creed. It is a movie that works remarkably well in terms of like contextualizing the Rocky mythos. It's a great story if you look at it as a story of people whose lives have been broken, battered, and Rocky has stepped over in his heroic arc to become champion of the world. In terms of it's a story of people dealing with trauma and grief as a result of like Rocky's actions over the course of the 4 or 7 films that make up his own franchise. But it also, but it kind of suffers a little bit because that means it doesn't know what to do with Rocky himself. There is a recurring subplot in which Rocky tries to get the city council to fix a broken lamp outside of his house. That is at the stage of we have no idea what to do with Rocky.
Maybe
in this
Hey,
movie.
forget about it.
Though,
It is.
in the
but
context of
it is,
he's
and there-
sidelined. Like.
It is, and there's a sense that like the movie would be a lot better if Stallone wasn't the second build lead, if he were like an and or a with. If you could do it
we're
and you
not
could
there
have
yet,
like
though.
3 scenes with Stallone
We'll
in
be
it
there
in the
by
film.
Creed 4.
Yeah, or maybe
we're
5.
sort of working there. But it works remarkably well. It's kind of like, it's Stephen Capel's directing. He's obviously no Coogler. And he does a number of interesting things throughout the film where he plays with your expectations. The opening scenes are shot in a way that almost make you want for Creed to do that impressive long take that Coogler did, introducing Adonis in the first film. And he kind of teases that twice and refuses it, which is a very
kinda
clever
like
and
that.
very
Yeah,
canny way of doing it. Where it's like, look, I'm not going to imitate the last guy slavishly, which is very, very good.
And it's the way it should be.
It is. And I mean, it works relatively well. It hits all of the beats that it wants to hit. The cast are still incredibly winning. Tessa Thompson and Michael B. Jordan are fantastic together. And it kind of, and even Dolph
How's
Lundgren.
Drago Jr. actually? Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I never would have imagined that Dolph Lundgren would make my heart break.
If you ever read I think I did a review of the original
Rocky series.
No, the
Rocky
Expendables.
Five? Oh, okay.
Dolph Lundgren is legitimately great in that.
Yeah.
And I remember saying at the time, it's like, seriously, he's actually a good actor.
Well, there's
And the Universal Soldier. And
he's very good
Like,
in
yeah.
the Universal Soldier
Regeneration. I
Yes,
think
that's
it is,
exactly the life.
Dolph Lundgren is great. He's been low-key great for a long time.
And he's fantastic. He also is used very well in Hail Caesar. He's probably the only Rocky ensemble member to have starred in a Coen Brothers movie. But the thing that's really grabs you about and it's the thing about Creed 2 is the moment where he goes to the little place where Rocky's sitting and eating, the little deli, Adrian's, and he sits down and he looks at the wall and he says, nice photos, none of me. And there's a moment where he's talking about how, here you are hero in Russia. Nobody will touch the name Drago. And you almost feel sorry. There's these beautiful shots of him and his son wandering through Philadelphia, staring at the statue of Rocky. And it becomes this almost tragic, moving story about these characters who literally only existed so Rocky could beat them. So Rocky could become the hero. And communism. So Rocky could beat them and become the hero that he wanted to be, or was meant to be, according to the narrative arc that had been preordained by the films. And it's kind of it feels in that way as a logical extension of Creed, because Creed is also a story about the collateral damage. It's a story about a character who died so Rocky could feel bad and be motivated to actually take action, which is a very interesting way of approaching the film. It also there's some interesting, and it isn't as heavily patriotic as Rocky 4, because nothing could be as heavily patriotic as Rocky 4.
But Rocky 4 existed in the
context of the
the
Cold War.
80s.
Yeah.
I mean, the 80s were as weird and patriotic as America's probably ever gotten.
This also has a bit of a weird new Cold War thing going on, where the Russians launch a social media campaign in order to manipulate Adonis Creed into getting where they want to go. When Creed has to find himself, he has to go into the American wilderness and jog down these long empty roads in the middle of the desert in order to find some essence inside himself that will allow him to beat these Russians.
That's, in fairness, they do that in Rocky 4 as well.
Yeah, no, I know. That's exactly what they're doing.
Stallone goes into the wilderness while Lundgren is trained in the high-tech steroid Russian kind of...
and the idea is that it creates that contrast between how America sees itself and how Russia sees itself.
I couldn't get to see this, unfortunately.
I'm really looking forward to having... Because Ronan's seen it as well, and he has very strong thoughts on it, and you, as our Rocky scholar...
I couldn't see it this week because my wife wants to see it, and we couldn't kind of get a screen. And
by the way,
I'll be seeing this weekend.
Jay is too modest to do this, so I will point listeners to... You did a wonderful retrospective of the Rocky series on Scannain.
Yes, and reclaimed Rocky 5 as good, and you're all crazy if you think otherwise.
All right. We move on to the new releases.
And I'm not. I would have happily... I'd sell it anyway. I would tell anyone it's great.
All right, because it is, and I would wholeheartedly recommend it for listeners. All right, let's move on to the new releases. Opening this week is The Belly of the Whale.
This is an Irish film.
This is an Irish film. Yes, it opened the Galway Film Club.
I really like the poster for this, which is my way of saying I didn't see it in Galway. But I've heard decent things in Galway. I haven't heard much beyond that in terms of release.
It's been very quiet.
It's been low key. I didn't know it was even out this week. I knew it was out relatively soon because I'd seen a couple of posters.
It's been very, very low key. There's also Mug, which is directed by, and I apologize, I'm going to mangle this, Malgorzata Zumowska. which looks to be a Polish film. It's a man undergoes a face transplant and experiences ensuing identity issues.
Well, there's the Polish Film Festival on the IFI. I wonder if it's kind of
Oh,
showing in relation to that.
Kinopolis,
I don't
yes.
know if it is. That's just coincidental. I don't know.
Also, Jay, you're going to love this one, The Old
Fantastic.
Man and the Gun.
Oh, another David Leary film. Okay, yeah.
Which is
Right.
Robert Redford's last screen role, apparently, allegedly. It's very sweet, very
He's just
moving.
saying that for the award season.
I know,
He'll be
that's
like,
exactly.
This also explains why the poster has like, oh, this is such a great swan song for Redford's career. Because I remember seeing that and being like, he's not dead. Like, what are these people here?
Yeah,
And
no,
then
this- he
hearing
still
that
looks
was
good, too.
supposedly going to retire.
Yeah, no,
I like the way
Just tell
Lowry
me
has.
he doesn't jog in it, because there's that scene in like The Company You Keep of him jogging and he looks like he's going to die. Like, just
Stop, Robert.
standing on
Stay
it.
alive.
Like, please, I don't want to see you jog.
no, he mostly
Robert.
drives in this film.
That's good.
But Lowry seems to have gone full Malik in the sense of let's get Sissy Spacek in and everything now at this stage.
Oh, it's that old school Americana thing. It's set in 1981, but it's very weirdly shot like it's a movie from the late 60s, because obviously Redford. In fact, it includes like
Please
footage
tell me
from
they
his
don't
earlier
de-age
films.
him.
No, they don't
Oh,
de-age him,
thank
but
They
includes
have
footage
loads of
from
pictures
earlier
of him
films.
from when he was younger. Though.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's loads of them just lying around that they
Yeah,
can use.
and there's also material from films that he's actually shot that can be sliced in like during flashbacks and stuff. So they have footage of him like running away from prison in a prison uniform. So it would be foolish not to use that in the
That's
context
cool,
of this
actually.
film,
The
which is
best,
a very
the best thing used to that I've ever seen was the Limey.
Terrence Stamp.
With Terrence Stamp that uses Ken Loach film Poor Cow as his kind of origin story, which is amazing.
Yeah.
In footage.
The Limey's horribly.
I would
It's
also
great,
counter
it's
in
great.
30 Rock, there's a great bit where they have the HD camera versus the normal camera,
Yeah, yeah.
and they all walk past, and for Alec Baldwin walking past, they use like 1980s Alec Baldwin walking past. It's done very well. But we'll have to wait for The Irishman to see the actual like CGI.
Oh,
de-aging
yeah.
So
process.
afraid of that.
I know.
So afraid.
Why won't you just hire younger actors?
Please.
No need.
I-
We could do young Joe Pesci.
But if we're gonna have like,
I miss makeup. I really
Yeah,
like that
no, I
cheesy
don't
like
know.
monster movie makeup where
Yeah.
they wore like a box on their face and it was like, look, it's young Joe Pesci.
Like every
Like,
time.
if we all went to see Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, and look at how brilliant
The
and,
young
and how
cast
much
enough, yeah.
mileage they got out of just casting younger actors as younger versions of the. Of
It's
the
easy.
characters.
Just do it. Like.
Yeah, and it's like an art in
Yeah, yeah.
itself to get someone who can nail somebody.
I actually thought, speaking of Beautiful Boy, that like Timothy Chalamet does have a look of Steve Carell to him. That was well cast. Like they look like father and son. Yeah.
And yeah, but Old Man and the Gun is very good. I quite liked it. It's very sweet. It's very old fashioned, and it scratches that sort of nostalgic itch. It's a it's an outlaw story that's very much in love with the idea of the outlaw.
I may pass on this.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
All right. The Return of the Hero, directed by Laurent Tirade, is out today. It's out this weekend as well, starring Jean Dujardin as a... Sorry, I apologize for... Jean Dujardin. Apologies. John of the Garden, who is also... And Melanie Laurent, who is... I apologize for that as well. The story...
Her in anything in ages.
She's great. She really is. And in 1809 France, Captain Nouvelle is called to the front, leaving his future bride heartbroken. Her sister decides to write letters on his behalf to cheer her up, but it all goes south when he reappears. And obviously you have a comedy of errors where he doesn't match the letters that he's allegedly been sending. The Snowman, the Snow Dog is also out because we're scratching that Christmas itch at the moment. Which is, it's the old,
I
like...
feel I've seen that before. Did that
it's-
not come
Wasn't
out
that
a few
on
years
TV?
ago? Yeah.
Yep, that's it. It's like we're flying through the air sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yep, so it's that sort of stuff.
I don't recognise the sequel. It's not canon.
It's not canon.
The Snowman are nothing for me.
They've de-aged him. He doesn't look like the...
Computer. I love the idea of computer generating the animation to make it look.
Do you know
younger.
what? I wouldn't be surprised. Such is my cynicism about these people.
Mowgli is out on Netflix this weekend. The darker, angrier.
Tell us all about it, Darren.
Now that I can, because the embargo's actually passed, there was a wonderful like retroactive embargo imposed on this. Mowgli is fascinating because it's a movie that is very. You can see why Warner's sold it to Netflix because it is a ridiculously dark and twisted and warped and like completely not in keeping with what audiences would expect from a story about the Jungle Book because it's all codified by Disney now. The interesting thing about it is that it demonstrates how absolutely every decision that Disney made in their two versions of the Jungle Book was probably the correct one in terms of like getting the audience on board. And I say that as somebody who appreciates Mowgli as like a weird, dark, warped, like really misanthropic, bleak, like nihilistic fairy tale about life in the jungle as a metaphor for human existence.
What did you think was going to happen with this film, though?
There is a moment, and I shit you not, in which Mowgli, who is played by a 10-year-old kid, waves a fire stick in the air at Shere Khan and says, "If I ever see you again, I'll burn you. I'll set you on fire and watch you burn alive. There's another moment where Mowgli is being comforted. Wait, it gets better. Where Mowgli's being comforted by a little albino wolf pup who's tiny and small and bullied by all the other wolves in the pack. A little wolf pup tries to help Mowgli feel better by saying, Mowgli, we're the same. We're special. Mowgli turns to him and says, we're not special. That's just something your mother tells you to make you feel better about coming out wrong. There's a moment where Mowgli, a 10-year-old kid, I need to reiterate that enough, a 10-year-old kid stands in a tent with a sleeping, passed-out, drunkard, grown man, takes out a knife, and seems to sorely consider gutting this man as he's sleeping. It is a very hardcore, not your parents' Jungle Book.
The Last Jedi all over again.
It's a very strange film, but I kind of like it. The animation is fantastic in terms of it's not like trying to be realistic or photorealistic, but it's one of those rare movies where you look at the computer animated characters. I'm thinking particularly of Bagheera, as played by Christian Bale. I'm thinking of the wolf leader Akuru, as played by Peter Mullen. And you look at them, and it's weird because you're like, that's like Christian Bale is playing a panther, but not with his voice. It's very strange, and it works very, very well.
Really? So they kind of have some of the face?
They have some of the facial features, and particularly the eyes. It's a remarkable accomplishment, as you might expect from Andy Serkis, who knows the industry backwards. It also has, it includes little details from the stories, the Rudyard Kipling stories, that go to a great deal of depth. So things like, for example, Bagheera's backstory, which is a lot more tragic and moving than anything in the Disney films. It doesn't really fit together. It doesn't really work. It's weird and it's odd, and Netflix, being entirely honest, is probably the best home for it.
All right.
In terms of other movies that are being released, Sorry to Bother You got an Irish release, finally!
I will go to that on Saturday.
I've been incredibly excited for this, and I'm looking forward to it, but I've seen a few sniffy
It's been
reviews.
so overhyped.
Yeah, I think that's probably...
What's interesting about this is the initial reviews were also quite sniffy, and then it got widely sort of embraced, and then you have the...
It's a return of the sniffiness.
But it's because you're going international now, because this has been out in the US since June, July.
Opinions.
Where you have on the festival circuit, there was a lot of sniffiness around it. It was too unfocused, it was too hazy, it was too broad, Boots was too inexperienced, and then it sort of had a wide release, and people who like weird movies, and I count myself among them, were like, this is kind of amazing. And then you had it going on the critical circuit again over the other side, where you had people being... And it's kind of interesting. It is one of my favourite films of the year so far.
Okay, no, I don't want to see it. I will get to it.
It's very much in the style of Paul Verhoeven.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's got this sort of really cartoonish satire of America as it exists. Except it's not so much... it does cover capitalism, but it's also obviously race as well as
Excuse me,
capitalism.
when I cough. Southland Tales. Excuse me.
Oh, no, I know. And we will get to Southland Tales eventually. We have promised you, Jay.
It's
we will
amazing.
all watch
It's
Southland Tales
amazing.
again at some point. And I love Southland Tales. Also out this week, White Boy Rick.
No.
Which
This is McConaughey, isn't it?
Yeah,
Doing the drug dealer in Detroit or something.
This is a very strange film. It is a film that is trying to be a socially conscious film about the horrors of the U.S. justice system, where people are railroaded for minor drug offenses and can have their entire lives destroyed as a result of the war on drugs, which is, of course, somewhat appropriate given that George H.W. Bush was buried this week. Mm-hmm. But you also have this weird thing where the movie is so committed to its central thesis. And the central thesis is the war on drugs is terrible, and it destroyed communities, and it did horrible things, and all that's true, and all that's fair. The issue is that it's so committed to that it never actually bothers developing its characters, to the point where it casts its lead actor this is his first screen credit. He is largely reactive throughout the film. He doesn't actually do anything proactive over the course of the film. He portrays a character who makes very few active decisions, has very little interiority as well on top of that, which is slightly problematic. You also have the fact that you have this huge star-studded cast around him, Matthew McConaughey playing his father. Matthew McConaughey is playing a passive father to a passive protagonist, which creates its own problems in terms of storytelling. Jennifer Jason Leigh is a member of the FBI, and this really, really, really hurts. It also has Brian Tyree Henry in his first subpar, the first subpar awards fair film that he starred in this year, which is really, really, that's what really hurt me about this. But the fact is that the film is terribly paced because it wants you to feel sorry for this character of Rick, so it spends a lot of time exploring his background in more depth without actually having a story. And the point the character actually makes a decision that influences the plot, that only happens at the start of the third act, which is when he says, "Hey, Dad, you know what we should do? We should deal drugs." And that's the point at which the plot actually starts happening, and things start happening, and people start making decisions that have consequences. But the issue is you've watched an hour and a half of the film before it reaches that point, because it wants to go into... And it's an understandable urge to go back into the history of drugs in Detroit and stuff like that, but it's not very compelling and very engaging. It's a very disappointing follow-up from Yann Damage, which is
it's 71.
Yeah, it is indeed. And then Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is previewing this week as well.
That looks great.
which is very, very worth seeking out. I won't go into too much depth because we'll be covering next week when it will simultaneously be in the top 10 and a new release somehow, because that's how these things
God,
work.
I hate those things.
But it is one of my films of the year. It is the best superhero film of the year. It's the best animated film of the year. It is an astounding piece of work, narratively, visually, cinematically.
And Nicolas Cage doing Bogart, so...
I mean, what
Sign
more?
me up.
You know, what more could you want? John Mulaney playing Spider-Ham.
Yes.
Spider Hound.
Ham.
Ham.
He's a
Little
pig. Yes.
Oh, like
He actually
like
utters
the
the line.
Simpsons.
He actually utters the line, "That's all, folks." At which point, when the other Spider-Man says, "Can we get away with that legally?"
Could
which
it stay, can they?
which is great. So I would wholeheartedly recommend that. All right. Until then, if people are looking for a bit more Grace, a bit more Alex, a bit more Jason in their lives, where can they find you guys online?
I host a podcast called When Irish Eyes Are Watching, and if you Google that, I'm sure you can find us.
I'm on Letterboxd at Pixie Grace.
At Twitter, at Jay Coyle.
You can find me online at Darren_Media, co-host another podcast called The 250, where this week myself and my co-host Andrew will be taking a look at Slender Man. It is,
Dun, dun.
yes.
That's one of the 250 best films of all time.
No, it's one of the 100
One of the worst.
200.
That was my second
Somehow,
guess.
yeah, somehow you might have
One of
called it
those
there.
answers is correct.
Don't worry. And we are down with the kids. We are as down with the kids as the producers who greenlit, wrote, and directed the project. I can assure you that right now, listeners. Take it easy. We'll be back next week. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.